everybody, it's Doug here. Welcome back to the channel and welcome back to a Mystic Eye Games Halloween haunt discussion of sorts, where I'm going to take a look at some of the top games I think you might want to play for Halloween. Now, in this, I'm going to talk about games that really fit the theme, so you won't see things like space adventure games that might have a Halloween or aliens type slant. Like one of my honorable mentions, which would be Nemesis, which is a fantastic dark horror style science fiction game. I'm talking about purely horror games that would fit the Halloween type theme that we'd be looking for. And in that, I'm going to look at a couple of categories. I'm not going to have a ton of games on this list, but I'm going to look at some things like which one's most accessible, which one's most family favorite, which ones have the most theme for me that we can get to the table, which ones are long or short, things of that nature. I'm going to give you some suggestions that you might be able to play during the Halloween period. So let's get started with this little Mystic Eye Games special where I'm going to talk about the Halloween games you could bring to the table this Halloween. Okay, so I'm not going to do this in any particular order of best to worst or anything like that. I'm going to talk about them in slightly different categories. And the first one I'm going to bring up is one of my all-time favorites. It hits the table a lot for me. You'll see that I have many episodes of it on my channel. And that is a game by Flying Frog Productions called A Touch of Evil. Now, what do I like about this game? Well, it evokes a real sense of theme and story. It's dripping with story. It's not difficult to play. And it's got a lot of great expansions if you want to make it longer, a bigger game perhaps. But most importantly, it can involve the entire family. It's not over-the-top horror or scary. It's got a ton of variety in it in regards to your ability to pick your characters. Like you can pick different characters. And you basically in the game, you have come to the town of Shadowbrook, where you are helping to defend the town against some type of ancient evil, and that could be anything from the headless horseman to a vampire perhaps, or to a werewolf. And your characters will go from location to location, rolling dice to move. It is a roll and move mechanic, and visiting these locations to gather clues, items, and capabilities to destroy the evil that's haunting the town. And if you're playing cooperatively, which is in my mind the best way to play the game, that you will eventually build up enough power, you will decide to take on as a group the enemy and go into a showdown. It's a very effective game. It's great. One of the things I like about it the most is that you also have these politics going on within the town. You have these town elders that are trying to have their own ends, and some of them can end up being an evil adversary to you, joining the enemy in their cause. It's a great game, and it's definitely one of my favorites. It is a bit of a long game. It can be a long game, and it's what I call a Scooby-Doo game, where you're going back and forth and visiting different locations to uncover the clues, right? But I can't tell you, I haven't had a single person sit down and play a game of A Touch of Evil with me and not enjoy it. So the first thematic game I'm going to talk about that you could bring to the table for Halloween is A Touch of Evil by Flying Frog Games. Now, keeping in line with the general theme of a thematic game, the next one I'm going to bring up to you, it might be a little hard to get. And yet it's a fun game. It's along the same lines, in theory, of a couple of games that I really like. You would see some similar mechanics to A Touch of Evil, as well as maybe Arkham Horror or something of that nature. I think those two are probably the best. And that is the game Slaughterville. Now, Slaughterville is a 1 to 4 player game where you, again, are taking on characters, but this time in a modern day setting, where you also be, trying to defeat a villain. And in that, you will be working towards, maybe you're dealing with some, what they call cannibal rednecks or carnival evil clowns or something like that. And the villains are going to be working against you while you're trying to stop them prior to their event that would allow them to win. It's not a roll and move game. You don't have to roll dice to move, but you do move from location to location in the town. And there's quite a bit of variety in that. The town can have all kinds of different things in it. It's pretty neat. One of the things I do like about it is the variety in the villains. And it is modern day as opposed to A Touch of Evil, which is in a colonial type town. Or Slaughterville will take place today, and you might be dealing with a serial killer or even a zombie horde or something like that. There's quite a bit of variety in it. What I do like about it, it's a little more adult. I wouldn't say it's as family friendly as even A Touch of Evil is. but it certainly can be played with the family as long as the family's old enough. I wouldn't make them the kids too young on it because it does have some rather adult-like themes. But I do like Slaughterville quite a bit. And again, if you like games that are basically not super deep or heavy or super long, then Slaughterville would be a great choice for you. Now, once again, this game might be difficult to get, so if you can't, then I apologize, but this is definitely one of the games I would put on the table that evokes the right theme and gives you the sense of Halloween. Now, if you want something much darker and much heavier and with a lot more rules to it and a lot more strategy to it than the games I've just mentioned, then perhaps Lobotomy is a choice for you. Now, I like Lobotomy a lot. It evokes a great sense of theme. It takes place in an asylum where you're one of the inmates and you are suffering from mental illness that makes you see the nurses and orderlies and the warden as horrible, horrible creatures that you have to defend yourself and fight your way through to freedom. And there's different scenarios, and the layout to the sanitarium can be completely different. And I think it does a great job of doing this without playing down the fact that you're mentally ill or casting an odd light on it. It's pretty good. Definitely adult themed. And one of the things you just never know in the game is, are you just fighting normal people, or are these really monsters hiding in regular people's clothing, right? You just don't know. And the storyline provokes and evokes this feeling of dread. It's also very hard. This is a game that I would play with gamers, but I really do enjoy it. One of the things that I love about it is the timer is the big, massive, evil warden. He looks like a demon. And he's stalking the halls, and it's the timer for your game. And as he gets around to a certain point, you can lose if you haven't completed the objectives and or defeated him by the time he gets to a certain point on the board. And it's not done like on a track where he's going 1, 2, 3. He's stalking through the halls, and they're numbered, and you follow along the numbers. But he's stalking through the halls, and you can still encounter him, and it's pretty creepy. And the artwork and everything is really evocative and frightening. So if you want a more in-depth strategic board game that's going to give you that same deep horror feel and is really an adult, scary looking board game with some deep and interesting rules, then that might be a game for you. Now, the one thing I'll tell you about it, it is a gamer's game. The rules aren't perfect. It was kickstarted. You really got to decipher some things and make sure you're playing it right. But it can still be a fantastic Halloween game for you. So that is Lobotomy. Oops, how'd that get in there? I'm not sure. I hope I didn't scare you on Halloween. Anyway, that's what it's for. Now, if you want something a little lighter, more of a simplistic game, something that has a lot of fun elements to it, I'd like to recommend to you Bloody Inn. Now, this may be another game that's a little hard to find, as is Lobotomy. Lobotomy is probably very difficult to find. But what I do like about the Bloody Inn is that you're playing, it's a competitive game where you're playing against each other as owners of an inn in, I guess, Middle Ages or late colonial France, where you are murderers and you're trying to hide the bodies and steal all their stuff and everything like that. And you put the guests in rooms. It's got some clever gameplay elements. It is card based, but it does have a small board. And basically, the person that can add on the most to their part of the hotel, kill the most people in the best ways, and gain the most allies in doing so is usually the winner of that game. Now, again, I'm not sure I'm sure you could find a secondhand copy of the Bloody Inn, and it's not again, very thematic, not a real heavy game. I would recommend it for young children just because the theme is so adult with the murderous inn owners. It's like a version of Hostel or something like that. It's really hard to say, but I really do like it. And so I'm going to not talk too much about Bloody Inn. It's a very small, simple game to play. But if you want something like that, you can break out, play like in 30, 40 minutes, knock it out, still get the Halloween vibe. This is a good one. So let's talk epic horror games. Big scale, lots going on. Either big scale in globe-trotting horror, or big scale in the fact that there's a lot of detail, a lot of depth, a lot of storytelling, maybe even an app. I think the first one we're going to talk about is Eldritch Horror by Fantasy Flight Games. This is a great game where you're trotting around the globe trying to stop a Cthulhu like event from happening against different elder gods. It could be Cthulhu himself, could be Nyarlathotep, it could be any one of them. And if you're a fan of Cthulhu or if you've recently watched Lovecraft Country, you might find this to be a great game for you. You play an individual character that's running around the globe, trying to defeat evil and uncover a much bigger plot to destroy the world. The artwork is fantastic. The storytelling is fantastic. However, I'm going to tell you right now that Eldritch Horror is a game for gamers again. I would not call this a game for people that haven't played games before. I would not call this a game for the light of heart because it is going to be a long one. I also wouldn't play it with more than 4 people because we did an 8-player game and it lasted approximately 12 to 13 hours. People were coming in and out of the game and literally giving up. But you take it down to a 3 to 4 player horror game and you like Lovecraft, but not necessarily typical horror tropes, then this is going to be a good one for you. The other one I'm going to talk about, also from Fantasy Flight Games, and one of my favorite horror Cthulhu type games of all time. And again, while it's not as on the grand globe-trotting scale as Eldritch Horror, it brings it home. And it is epic in its storytelling, and it's driven by an app, so you don't have to have somebody playing the bad guys, or you're definitely playing against the game in this cooperative game called Mansions of Madness. And I'm going to say second edition specifically, that is the important part. In Mansions of Madness, second edition, you play an investigator who's coming to the aid of someone, or maybe participating in a story. In the app, there are probably dozens of stories you can tell now if you own the expansions. Even if you don't, the base game has enough content in it to keep you going for hours. The narration is expert. The videos are expert. The way the game runs is second to none. It is absolutely one of the best thematic horror games that you can ever have. And I'm going to give you a piece of advice on that one. When last I played it, I actually projected it through my Apple TV from my iPad onto my TV. That's the way to go. I think there's other way. I don't remember how I did it, to be honest with you, but I did manage to do it. And so imagine we're at a table in a relatively not completely well lit room, but well lit enough for us to read our cards and everything, with the entire app and the narration and the story showing on the TV, the big 50-inch plus television. It was fantastic. I cannot recommend either of these games more than I possibly could imagine. They are fantastic, fun games on an epic scale. But again, these are gamers' games. This isn't something that I'd bring necessarily to the in-laws or the regular family members that aren't gamers. However, they might really like Mansions of Madness if you can get them into it. It is fun. Anyway, those 2 games are very high on my list, and I highly recommend either one for Halloween, especially Mansions of Madness. Now, how can we talk about Halloween without talking about the zombie hordes and talk about the possibility of playing a zombie game during Halloween? And I'm going to demonstrate or talk about 2 of them in this clip. I'm going to talk about the one you're seeing right now, which is another Flying Frog Games production, Last Night on Earth. Now, this game is a little different in that you're playing, it's a one against many game, meaning that one person plays the zombies while the other people play the townsfolk trying to survive whatever scenario that you have going on with the storyline. Now, one of the things I love about this game is that it really evokes the feeling of a zombie movie very, very well. The typical thing where you might be in a small town that's invaded by zombies, and the only mission you have is to get to the truck and leave. But to do that, you need car keys, you need gasoline, and you need other things while avoiding the zombies in the town and perhaps not working very well together. The zombie player gets to play a number of cards from his hand against the players while moving zombies around the board. The board is really well laid out and very cleverly done with a big center board and modular pieces on the outside that could represent different buildings and locations depending on the scenario. In that, you could be playing a number of characters like the farmer's daughter or the local sheriff, the jock from the high school, or the prom queen. It's a great game like that. You run around and collect items and try and keep the zombies off your back. They're very hard to kill in the game. The zombies you can move them around a lot or push them back and things like that. You can trap them, but ultimately you have to survive. And one of the cool things about it is it's a really family-oriented game in the sense that it's not too heavy on the adult theming and things like that. But it is a zombie game, so it is about people getting torn apart by undead creatures like The Walking Dead or something. You might be wondering why I'm not mentioning a Walking Dead game. There's a couple of them out. None of them feel particularly horror to me. They feel more Walking Dead. Where this game, Last Night on Earth feels horror, like a horror game to me. That's a very, very different thing. So that's Last Night on Earth. And again, with this game, you could find this just about anywhere. I think you can find it on the Flying Frog Games store. And like A Touch of Evil, it's kind of a roll and move type game. It's not too heavy, but there's a lot of card play and a lot of fun in the game. And again, being a one versus many game with someone playing the villain, it's a little different and gives you a different experience than, let's say, A Touch of Evil. The next zombie game on my list actually takes us in a different direction in the realm of a solo game. And it was produced by a company that sadly is no longer around. It was purchased by somebody else, and frankly, I haven't been able to follow it well enough to even tell you who that is right now. But there was a company called Victory Point Games, which has made some of the best games that I've played. One of them being um, Darkest Night, which is one of my all-time favorites. And I would consider it almost a horror game, but because it's fantasy themed, I didn't include it here. But the other one, as you're seeing as we're looking at it, is Dawn of the Zeds. Now, this is another great horror themed zombie game, but this one really is best played solo. You can play it with other players. I just don't like that experience as much. It feels much better as a solo game. And in that, you're playing, again, playing characters trying to defend a town, except this time it's very tactical and very heavy as a rule set game. It's fantastic. You get to play a crazy guy from the town. You get to play the sheriff again. And what's cool about it is it's done in these acts, kind of like movies. And what you're trying to do is deplete out a deck of things that are going to happen that are bad before the National Guard comes. And if you can survive until the National Guard comes, then you win the game. By the way, this is not an easy feat. Dawn of the Zeds is a very hard game. And like I said, you can play it with others. But it feels best when you play a solo experience. And it's mainly because of the way the action system works, where every round the cards are going to dictate how many actions you have. Now, some of the characters, not all of them, have bonus actions, and you can use those as well. So when you're playing with multiple players, it's a little hard to decide who's going to get what. It's a very challenging part of the game. It doesn't feel as natural as when you play solo. It also has a one versus many version where someone plays, or one versus one or something, where someone plays the evil side, the enemy side, the zombies, and an evil doctor that is creating zombies. And what I love about Dawn of the Zeds is it escalates. Like you can go from easy mode to harder mode to advanced mode, and the game changes fundamentally with each mode you tack on as you learn the different components of the game because it is a pretty heavy game. It's not a particularly long game necessarily, but it is heavy, and the rule set is heavy, and you got to learn to play it before. It's definitely a walk before you run type game, and you got to learn to play it. It's not a non-gamers game. Again, this one's definitely for people who enjoy heavy strategic games. But again, one of my favorites, Dawn of the Zeds, Victory Point Games. Wish they were still around. Get the second edition of it. The first edition was fantastic, but the second edition brought higher level components, better components. You can tell the difference. The board is a double-sided, nice board. The components in the game are fantastic. Get the second edition of Dawn of the Zeds. Definitely one of my favorite zombie games to play, especially when I'm just deciding I'm going to play solo. So if you're finding yourself sitting there on Halloween throwing candy at little children because we're socially distancing as they come across the street at the curb, and you want something to do, you could set up a game of Dawn of the Zeds on your table and play it just by yourself as you're hurling candy or eating candy, whatever you want to do with it. So anyway, I highly recommend this game. It is a lot of fun. As you can see, I have some gameplay from my session on the table here. And again, it'll be one that I recommend and play for years to come. Dawn of the Zeds. I hope you can get a copy of it. You probably still can. It might be a little hard to find, but give it a try. Now I'm going to take a bit of a departure, and this is probably the game that I should have shown first because it is truly a family-friendly, very accessible horror game that you can play on Halloween with the entire crew, have a great time with it, and enjoy the game a lot. It's a cooperative game called Horrified, where you are trying to defeat the monster movies from Universal, Frankenstein, The Creature from the Black Lagoon, Dracula, The Mummy, etc. The Bride of Frankenstein. It's a really great game. It's very family friendly, very accessible to everybody, and able to be found everywhere. So again, it's an award-winning game, I believe. I tell you right now that if you had a family of wide-ranging ages and people that weren't necessarily into gaming and you didn't want to compete with them, you want to play something cooperative, Horrified would be my choice. In Horrified, you're playing an investigator that's come into the Universal Studios world It's not really their lot. It's more like their community, I guess. And you're going to different areas trying to investigate and solve the mission, solve the quest that's been presented to you by the various different monsters that you're playing in the scenario. There's little components that you add onto the board to represent that. The creatures, Black Lagoon, Frankenstein's lair. There's that create different things for you to have to do to solve those problems. Now, for example, it's you will be going against more than one at a time, and depending on the difficulty level you want to choose, you could be going against four, however many you want. But one of the things I like about it, for example, is the Bride of Frankenstein and Frankenstein. You have to get these tokens that help solve things, and if you don't do it, and they actually find their way to each other before you solve their problem, which is to make them realize that they're not monsters, then you put yourself at risk of losing the game. With Dracula, you have to find his coffins and destroy them and all this other stuff. They all have very different things that you have to do to solve them. And the cool thing about it is you're doing it at the same time. Like you're not just playing against one monster for the entire game like you would in A Touch of Evil or something like that. Another great thing is you're rescuing characters from the various Universal movies, everybody from Abbott and Costello to all kinds of characters that you get to rescue and bring to other locations to help you secure special things that you will need to complete the game, or not necessarily need, but would help you to complete the game. Horrified, again, is very family friendly. It can be played solo too because it's cooperative, which is one of the things I love about all these cooperative games. While Dawn of the Zeds is best played solo, some of the other games like A Touch of Evil, Slaughterville, Mansions of Madness, heck, almost all of these, now that I'm thinking about it, with the exception of the Bloody Inn, which has a solo version, can be played solo. You could even pull it off with Last Night on Earth, but I don't know. However, I'm going to say that Horrified is probably the best game for your family for Halloween. Now I'm taking you on a real different journey. Now we've talked about board games. I've given you a bunch of board games that you can play on Halloween, landing in the end of this segment with Horrified. But there's another game I really love, and it's great, man, for a Halloween event if you have some friends together, preferably four or so, plus yourself. And that is an actual horror game called 10 Candles. Now, what I love about 10 Candles is that it's a one-shot deal where you need zero preparation to play. And even though there's a game master and there's players, the game master is more of a component of the game and participating in the game as opposed to having to set up all this stuff and prepping the game. The game master in this case is really just driving the narrative forward, the narrative that the players are creating. And you do this by having a table of candles in a circle with a bowl in the middle, and you pick traits of your character, what your character's on just index cards. It's so simple, so fun, and so filled with emotion and horror. Absolutely amazing. 10 Candles can be played anywhere. You just need some candles, even those fake candles that you light up, uh, uh, and a bowl that you can technically burn the personality cards you have in. It's fantastic in the emotions and feelings and sense of horror that it evokes, because you're trying to take on this nameless evil, this others that nobody really knows what they are, and you kind of make up what they are as you go. It's a heck of a lot of fun. It provides you some scenarios in the book, and one of the things that's really neat about it is you will snuff out the candles uh, as you fail things, and the thing that's interesting is you will always lose. And one of the cool things about that, there's always a sense of dread. There's a sense of never accomplishing the goal, but there's hope because you have these cards that give you hope and help you push forward, even though you know if you played it even once, in the end, you're not going to survive the encounter. This is a fantastic game for Halloween. I cannot recommend it enough. You can get it in bookstores. You can find it anywhere. That's 10 Candles. Now you're probably saying, Doug, but there's so many other games out there. Why aren't you mentioning all these other games? And you're right, there's a ton. But I mentioned just some that I think evoke the sense of Halloween best. And there are some honorable mentions that I'd like to talk about while we're here. In particular, I'd like to talk about Zombicide. Now, Zombicide is not really a horror game per se. It's more like an action adventure game, but it does definitely evoke the feeling of tension. This is more like a Walking Dead version of a zombie game as opposed to a Night of the Living Dead version of a zombie game. And it's fantastic. It's so much fun. It's unbelievable. And there are other horror games. There's tons of them. There's so many others. There's Run, Fight, or Die, which is another zombie game that I like a lot. And there's some other dark. There's Deep Madness, which is a science fiction underwater based game where water is almost as terrifying as the creatures you're fighting. So there's plenty of things that you can see and do in the horror genre in board games, but these are some of the ones I just wanted to mention to you and hopefully give you an opportunity to get them to the table. So I hope you'd enjoyed this video. And I hope you've enjoyed what I've presented here and the games that I've presented. I can't recommend them highly enough. In the end, I just want you to have fun and enjoy gaming, especially horror gaming. So I want to thank you first for watching this video. I really want you to, I hope you rather, like, share, and subscribe to my channel so you can learn more about these games and many, many others. And I do complete, if this is the first time you're watching one of my videos, I do full playthroughs of all kinds of different games, including almost all the ones you've seen here. The last honorable mention I'll make as I close out is Arkham Horror, which I did not put on this list. It is definitely a gamer's game. It's one of the granddaddies of Lovecraft games, not the third edition, the edition before that. And I love the game. I just don't think it has its place in a nice Halloween evening playthrough. Now, it might for some, it just wouldn't for me and my family. So anyway, guys, thanks so much. I appreciate it. Take care. I appreciate all the likes, shares, and subscribes. And I will talk to you in the next video. Please enjoy your Halloween. Be safe. Practice all the safety measures you think you need. And I will see you in the next video.